He was dead. I was convinced they'd put me in jail and I would never see Alice again.
Survival horror is a genre that some would say has been overdone in video games. Focusing on blood and gore lately more than actual terror-inducing moments, games like Resident Evil and Dead Rising have desensitized us to true horror. Looking at this as a challenge, Remedy Games, the folks who brought us Max Payne, came at us with a new game that they deem more psychological thriller than survival horror. They came at us with Alan Wake. Hey everyone, this is Ray Carcillo from Classic Game Room, and Alan Wake starts by following the title character through his mundane life as he struggles with a horrible case of writer's block. It's been 2 years since Alan has written anything of note, and he's plagued by insomnia and nightmares. Finally, at the behest of his wife Alice, Alan decides to take a vacation with her to the quiet and tranquil town of Bright Falls in Washington. Alan immediately feels out of place in this rural backwater town. Everyone from the local radio DJ to the waitress at the Main Street diner begin to swoon over the great Alan Wake's presence, as he realizes this is probably the closest thing most of these people ever get to touching Hollywood.
Alan Wake? Oh God, I am your biggest fan. I know people say that all the time, but I really am.
I'm glad to hear that.
Rose.
As Alan rushes to find the local grease monkey, who seems to be in charge of his cabin's key, he instead comes across a haunting old woman who says the mechanic is indisposed at the moment, but left his key with her. Alan takes it without thinking twice, in order to escape the star-struck stares of the local yokels, and heads with Alice for the cabin on the lake. But things quickly go awry when night comes. The power goes out, Alice disappears, and before Alan knows it, he is sitting behind the wheel of his wrecked car and has no idea what's happened to him. All he does know is that he keeps stumbling across pages from a manuscript he can't remember writing. He keeps seeing visions of a crazed version of himself on TV sets across the town, and that he still needs to find Alice. A mysterious dark presence, though, is working to make sure that our writer friend does not accomplish his mission, and goes about possessing the normally peaceful townsfolk of Bright Falls and moving them into Alan's path. As Alan begins moving against the dark presence, though, he comes to realize that the manuscript he keeps stumbling across seems to have some precognitive abilities as he tries to shed some light on the puzzle laid out before him. And they could be the key to him surviving this nightmare come to life.
Puzzle required. Fair and square.
I really can't say any more beyond that without giving away the entire plot, but when they describe Alan Wake as a psychological thriller, they mean it. With more plot twists than a Twizzler, Alan Wake will have you on the edge of your seat as you addictively play your way through the 6 episodes that comprise the game. And I do mean episodes. With heavy inspiration from shows like Lost, Twin Peaks, and The X-Files, Alan Wake is set up like a television show or HBO miniseries, considering how long it'll probably take your average gamer to get through each episode. With full previous episode recaps, theme music, and cliffhanger endings, Alan Wake is an accomplishment in video game storytelling, and will have conspiracy theorists out there talking about it like several of the shows it drew inspiration from. Alan Wake isn't just a spectacularly laid out story, though. The gameplay is top-notch for the most part as well. The townsfolk who are possessed by the dark energy that lives in the shadows means that the enemies can come from almost anywhere. This gives you the stress of a survival horror's gameplay, but with the rarely seen factor of unpredictability, as an enemy can truly come from any source of darkness, continuing the psychological thriller theme as you begin to dread looking around every new corner. Another aspect of this is that later in the game, not only are people becoming possessed, but also animals and even inanimate objects that violently hurl themselves in your path. Since all of your enemies are comprised of shadows, Alan Wake incorporates a brilliant new way of fighting these unusual enemies. A shotgun or rifle is no longer your greatest weapon. It's flares and flashlights. You must use whatever light sources you can find to wear down the shadow shields many of the possessed cloak themselves in, before you can fire away with conventional weaponry. Your flashlight also works as an aiming sight for your weapons, in order to eliminate any need for a conventional aiming system seen in most third-person shooters. Even if you run out of ammo, though, a plethora of batteries for your flashlight could mean the difference between life and death, as enemies can be held at bay with your light long enough for you to either find more ammo, or to make it to a safe haven. The light versus dark system also means usually useless weapons can become juggernauts. Flashbang grenades can clear entire screens of enemies, and a flare gun can become like a grenade launcher as they give off enough light to completely burn away the possessed. There were a couple of problems I had with the gameplay though. The combat system was a little faulty in that the shadows are still clinging to actual people, and in theory a headshot should do more damage than shots to the leg or torso, and this was not the case. It became frustrating that 3 headshots with a pistol did the same amount of damage as 3 shots to the arm with the same weapon. Another frustrating thing was that the game incorporated a radar system in order to keep the player from getting completely lost in the massive Pacific Northwest wilderness that the game of course created. It was a nice feature, but I felt myself obsessing over it, and it nudged me away from exploring as much as I should have. There was also a couple of problems with the graphics. Although spectacular in many ways, from lighting effects that were obviously crucial to the gameplay mechanics, to water and other environmental effects, there were only maybe 10 enemy character models for the entire game. With a game that would probably take most gamers 12 to 15 hours to complete on hard mode, to see the same handful of models thrown at us, especially later in the game, was a sad sight indeed. The audio for the game was solid but not spectacular. The original score and licensed music for the game really helped with the whole TV show feel, and the sound effects were spot on, but the voice acting was only par with what we've come to expect nowadays.
Sheriff Sarah Breaker, you are...
I'm Alan Wake, but listen, I was in a car crash. My wife Alice, she's missing.
Calm down, Mr. Wake.
I'm not saying we needed Noah North to play Alan Wake, since he seems to play every single other male video game character out there, but the voice acting seemed almost a little forced at times for many of the characters. Another positive for the game, though, is the replay value. Unlocking a nightmare difficulty upon completion of your first playthrough, this new mode allows you a chance to collect additional manuscript pages, and there are also coffee thermoses and other collectibles to still gather after beating the game, and there's even some DLC already out with more on the way. I admit, normally I would need a little more than that to garner a game's replay value a positive, but the story is so good that any hope that it won't end is indeed a positive for me. All in all, Alan Wake is a game that stays with you. You become emotionally invested in these characters, and that is a testament to the story laid out before you. Alan Wake is one of the best written games I've come across in a long time, and if they plan on doing a sequel, hopefully it won't be delayed as much as this first game was. Add in the creative combat system, and only a few minor complaints keep this from being gaming plot perfection.
Lie about my headache and memory loss. He'd send me to a hospital for tests. I couldn't leave without Alice.
Very well. I don't think you have a concussion, but you've obviously been through quite a shock. You should take it easy for a couple of days.
Thanks.